Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Nicole, and today we are doing another episode of What's on the Shelf, my deconstructed bookshelf tour. So rather than just kind of showing you a whole shelf of books, I'm actually bringing the books to you and one by one showing you every book that I own, kind of, because I'm sure as I add to it, some will be missed, and I'm sure I'm just missing some in general. Today, we are going to look at the books that I own that are considered part of the American Realism movement. So, this is a movement that basically occurred between 1850 and 1900 in the US. So, time period wise, things to keep in mind in terms of US history is that these are books that were written around the time of the Civil War and Reconstruction. There are various themes that you will find that all these books have in common, and some of them will include themes of disillusionment. You'll also have a lot of discussion about slums, industrialization, and there will frequently be talk of corruption of politicians. That's not true for every single one of these books, as you will find, but in general, the American realism movement would have had authors kind of looking just at the everyday life and times and places that people were living in. They're kind of looking at what people's motivations are, what's causing their behaviors, specifically through the lens of psychology of the time, as well as socially considering those ideas. So to start out, I'm sharing this time period because one of the books on my TBR for December actually falls into this American realism time period, which is The Soul of Black Folks by W.E.B. Dubois. So W.E.B. Dubois is really well known for being part of the abolitionist movement and sort of butting heads with Booker T. Washington, who had a more conservative view of that things should gradually change and take place. This book, particularly by W.E.B. Du Bois, is a piece of nonfiction, and it includes 14 different essays, some that he wrote specifically for this book, some that he collected together and was given permission to reprint in this book format. And the 14 essays in here, he really seeks to explain to the American people what the everyday life and really inner workings of life and the souls of Black Americans were like. It was something that he did not feel was well known, and some of his greatest ideas and work are shared in this book. This book is really insightful. I'm in the middle of reading it. It's my on my December TBR, and I would highly recommend this book. I should say that not all the books on this list have I read, so don't take these all as recommendations. These are all going to be great. I'll try and make sure to point out which ones I've read versus which ones are on my shelf and I'm hoping to read in the future. The other thing that I would like to share about each of these books is I use the Storygraph. This video is not sponsored by them, as my book app. And one of the nice features that's really recently been added is, in addition to the descriptions that are usually included on the book, which are usually just right from the back of the book, they have also started giving what they're calling a Storygraph preview, which is an AI developed preview of the book. The reason I like this section and think it's really neat and want to share it is because it shares, according to the AI, who this book might be a good fit for. So for The Souls of Black Folk, it says that it's a good fit for people who are interested in reflecting on the complexities of race and identity in America, particularly in the context of 20th century, in the context of the early 20th century. And I would agree with that based on what I've read so far. So if those things interest you, or if you're not sure if they interest you, pick it up and give it a try. This book is reasonably short, coming in at just over 200 pages. I've also been able to find an audiobook of it, and my version does include some questions that would be good for a book club at the back. I have two other books that kind of focus on the everyday life of African Americans during this time period. And the next one would be Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl by Harriet Jacobs. This is another nonfiction work that is and I have not read this book, I should add. This book is coming in at 242 pages and was published in 1861 and is a memoir, as it suggests, of the life of a slave girl. So again, it goes with that theme of looking at the everyday life. Obviously, this was written earlier in the time period, or at least she was reflecting on her life as when she was still a slave. According to the Storygraph preview, This is a good fit for those seeking a powerful and emotional journey of self-discovery, freedom, and the resilience of the human spirit. So if you like memoirs and you're looking for something that is a reflection on early American life from a slave perspective, this would be a good book to pick up. The third book that I have is Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe. Uncle Tom's Cabin is, at this point, I would say fairly well known. It is a fiction book, so the first one that I'm mentioning on this list, and also a classic. And it is about 464 pages and was first published in 1851, so actually before the last two books that I mentioned. Harriet Beecher Stowe is a well-known abolitionist, and according to the Storygraph preview, this book is a good fit for those interested in a thought-provoking and emotionally charged exploration of the complexities of race relations, slavery, and Christianity in 19th century America. This also reminds me of a book I just recently finished. That would be Clotel, or The President's Daughter by William Wells Brown. Clotel is a book that is, as it suggests, a fictional recounting of Thomas Jefferson's daughter that he had by a slave, whose name was Clotel. As research has found today, this is actually true. I don't know if her name, Clotel, was true, but the account that he did have children by one of his slaves is true. At the time that this was written, William Wells Brown put that out there as a legendary tale or a rumor that he was giving a fictional account of. However, in this book, he takes the time to go through and really speak about the again, everyday life of slaves, particularly those of mixed race. So what were known as mulattoes or quadroons, which Clotel would have been part of that category, where she had a white parent and a black mother. And usually this would have been from a master-slave relationship, and quite frequently not one that was engaged in a relationship that was engaged in with consent. Storygraph preview says that Clotel is a good fit for readers interested in thought-provoking and emotionally charged stories that explore the complexity of human relationships, slavery, and racism in a historically accurate and informative way. And I have to say, after having read this, I would completely agree with the historically accurate part of it, especially. One of the things that William Wells Brown did brilliantly in this book was actually take documented accounts and stories and evidence and intersperse them into the novel rather seamlessly, so that you felt like he was telling you something fictional, but was actually based in stories that happened. Okay, on a totally different note, the next book that I have is Five Little Peppers by Margaret Sidney. I just have it in this hardback edition. I recently picked this up at a little free library. And Five Little Peppers was originally serialized in a magazine, and the editor of the magazine, or publisher of the magazine rather, liked the stories so much, because it's a series of stories, that he ended up, I guess, getting to know the author, and they eventually married. Interestingly enough, they then moved to Concord, Massachusetts, and ended up living in a house called Wayside, which had previously been the home of Nathaniel Hawthorne and also Louisa May Alcott, so author of Scarlet Letter and Little Women, respectively. I know very little about the Five Little Peppers, other than that this is a children's book, and according to the Storygraph preview, this book is a good fit for those who enjoy heartwarming stories about family and growing up with a touch of hope and optimism. So again, you can see that touch of realism that's in there, just sharing the everyday life of family and children in this situation. Moving back to a well-known author, you have The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. This book is 292 pages and was first published in 1884. I'm really interested in rereading this. I recall when I first read both of those books, they're a series in theory, by Mark Twain, that I found it somewhat problematic, his portrayal of virtually everyone other than his main characters. And I know this book and both of these books actually have become more controversial as time has gone by. So I'm really interested in rereading them. However, Mark Twain is trying to present in that American realist style the life and times of two young boys, in this case, Huckleberry Finn, growing up in the South, and just the adventures that he comes across. And again, you'll see some of the aspects of things that are going on in the South happening in this book in terms of bringing up mention of the Civil War and Reconstruction. And you'll see that come into both of these narratives, but specifically in the Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Next up, I have Moby Dick by Herman Melville, also known as The Whale. This is a longer novel in 720 pages. This hardcover edition I have is just under 600 pages. So Moby Dick is considered Herman Melville's masterpiece and really a masterpiece of American literature. This book is an adventure as well as really sort of a nonfiction. It's a strange mix of books. A lot of people don't like Moby Dick because of the format of the book, which combines an adventure whaling story with what feels like just nonfiction prose about whales themselves. It is really thought provoking. You will see in here issues of race and the beginning thoughts of how humanity is looking at minority groups and that kind of thing. There are a mix of different races that are presented in this book, not always well, but sometimes surprisingly well done given the time period. And Storygraph Preview says that this is a good fit for those thinking a thought-provoking and immersive literary experience that explores themes of obsession, the human condition, and the nature of existence. So you do see in that description that idea of really exploring the experience of people of the time. Though in this case, I would say it's a smaller experience because it is the experience of whaling people as opposed to experience of a larger group of Americans. I also think Herman Melville does a really good job of using sort of trying to look at people's psyches to explain the behavior of the different characters in here. This is definitely, in my opinion, partially a psychological study of men, and especially men who are in the whaling industry, and what that takes to go out there, as well as exploring, like the description said, the human experience. I started Moby Dick earlier this year. I did not think I was going to like it. I started reading and I kept reading because I just thought it was funny the way the main character was initially described. But as I kept reading, I really got into the sense of this time period, which I think personally is the brilliance of this book, is that he really does engage you in that whaling experience and you become part of it. And, I would challenge you to read this whole book and not start talking like the New England whalers did by the end. Next, I have The House of Seven Gables by Nathaniel Hawthorne. This book is about 302 pages and was first published in 1851, so very much on the early end of the American realism period. This I have heard be described as a horror story. I'm not really sure. I know that there's crime and retribution are major themes in here. Storygraph Preview describes it as a good fit for those interested in a thought-provoking and introspective exploration of family, sin, and inheritance, set against the backdrop of a slowly unfolding narrative that allows for deeper examination of the human condition. So again, you're probably hearing that repeated theme of an exploration of human condition, and the way that is being done is by looking at the everyday lives of people and sort of not totally psychoanalyzing, but really examining and exploring the motivations behind their behavior. So this to me sounds very different than the Scarlet Letter, which I have read by Nathaniel Hawthorne. But I have a love-hate relationship with the Scarlet Letter, but I picked up The House of Seven Gables because it sounded so different than the Scarlet Letter that I was intrigued, because I did actually like Nathaniel Hawthorne's writing style to some extent. In some ways, I thought he was a bit of a boring storyteller, but the theme and the plot of this book sound fascinating enough that I'm hoping that it will overcome that, because basically what I'm saying is I'd like to see Nathaniel Hawthorne write a crime novel, or a novel with crime in it. Okay, next up I have Washington Square by Henry James. This book is a very short one. In this edition, it is about 176 pages and was written in 1880. Washington Square basically focuses, from what I understand, on just four middle-class characters in the basically 1870s. So it's an exploration of middle-class life I'm going to guess most likely in a city, as most of Henry James novels tend to have somewhat of a more urban feel to them, even if they're not necessarily set in a city itself. I have not read this book yet. In fact, this book and the last one that I have not read. The Storygraph preview describes this as a good fit for those seeking a thought-provoking and introspective reading experience as it delves into the complexities of human relationships, family dynamics, and the struggle for authentic expression in a rapidly changing society. And I'm fairly sure, again, like I said, that this is in an urban setting, and a lot of what you will find in American realism is that the exploration of society that they're looking at largely has to do with the effects of industrialization as well as the post-war changes and experiences. So I'm very curious to see what Henry James writes about in Washington Square, and the juxtaposition of what some people were writing about in terms of, like if you take W.E.B. Dubois, for example, the experience of Black people during this time period versus the experience of your middle class white person during this time period. So I'm not going to read these books at the same time, but I have them on my shelves because I would like to explore both of those perspectives. So the last novel I have is The Portrait of a Lady. Sorry for my sort of sticker mess here. This book comes in at 672 pages and was first published in 1881. So again, this is another novel by Henry James. Henry James is very interesting because though he's an American author, he quite frequently will place his characters outside the US. So The Portrait of a Lady is no exception. It really follows a young female protagonist and just her experiences and what she goes through as she's abroad. The Portrait of a Lady is described as being a good fit for people who are in the mood for a reflective and thought-provoking novel that explores themes of identity, freedom, and the consequences of one's choice. Or one's choices, rather. So again, this is looking at that sociological, psychological side of behavior, which is making me think that this is the book that I read, because I do very much recall the book I'm thinking of being about a young female protagonist and her being abroad and really having to deal with the consequences of one of the major choices that she made while she's abroad. So if this is that book, then it definitely is, I would say, a psychological character study. So that is it. Those are all the books that I own from this time period. There were a few other books that I wanted to mention. Some of them came up while I was talking, namely The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, Little Women by Louise Alcott, Louisa May Alcott. I don't know why I'm getting her name confused. I also wanted to mention two poets, just because I've included nonfiction and fiction here. But in case you weren't aware, two poets that wrote during this time period, and I think also really exemplify that American realism experience, would be Walt Whitman and his Leaves of Grass, as well as Emily Dickinson. These are all the books that I own that fall into the category of American realism. And I hope you could see, just by seeing this collection of them, just the similar themes that run throughout. Some of them talked about industrialization, but a lot of them just focused on, what is the life of the characters like, and trying to present it, sometimes because it's a nonfiction, extremely realistically, other times fictionalized versions of real things that happened to people, and sometimes completely fiction, but still presented as a real life experience. It also, I think, in all of these books, you see that idea of just examining their lives, a lot of psychological and sociological examinations of what is going on with these characters and their behaviors and the consequences of those behaviors. I don't really have any here that go onto that angle of talking about corrupt politicians, though I would say probably the three that cover the African-American experience probably do so more than some of the others. And perhaps partially you would get some of that theme going on also in The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. So that's it for today. If you have read any of these books and enjoyed them, especially the ones that I haven't read yet, let me know. If there's any books that I don't have that you loved and thought were great and are from this time period, again, it's 1850 to 1900, and that you'd like to share, also comment below. Like this video so that more people can see it. And if you're not, subscribe to my channel and become part of my little community that's growing here. So I hope you enjoyed this video and have a great day. Bye.